Zephyros, the alien general, stood tall, his massive frame looming over the human military command room. His imposing form, covered in gleaming armor, was a testament to his years of conquest and ruthless leadership. Yet, standing before Captain Emily Grant, Earth's top military strategist, he was, for the first time in his life, completely thrown off balance. His pride was undeniable, but there was something about her, the way she spoke, the way she carried herself, that had him completely disarmed. "You must be the one they sent to represent Earth," he said, his voice booming with a confidence that made the air in the room feel heavy. "I was expecting someone a little less." He trailed off, realizing his mistake. He had meant to say someone less intimidating, but Emily's presence didn't just dominate the room, it demanded respect. She stood with an almost casual confidence, arms crossed over her chest, her piercing gaze fixed on him, unflinching. Emily raised an eyebrow. "Less intimidating? You mean you thought humans would send a weakling to handle your big, bad alien ass?" Zephyros blinked, unsure if she was mocking him or just speaking truthfully. I didn't exactly expect someone who could stand toe-to-toe with me in strength." Emily smirked, clearly enjoying the general's discomfort. "Oh, I can definitely stand toe-to-toe with you. But we'll see if you can keep up." She gestured toward the sparring ring set up in the middle of the room, her confidence unshaken. "Let's have a little test of strength, just to see what you're really made of. Unless you're scared?" The challenge was clear, but Zephyros wasn't used to anyone, let alone a human, daring to question his strength. His reputation as a warrior stretched across galaxies. No one ever questioned his might. Yet there was something about this human woman that stirred something within him. Was it respect? Or was it curiosity? Either way, his pride couldn't allow him to back down. Without a word, he stepped toward the ring, his massive hands curling into fists. Emily followed, her movements deliberate and confident. They began the sparring match, with Zephyros instantly trying to overpower her with his size and alien strength. But to his surprise, Emily was fast. She dodged, blocked, and countered his every move with precision. It wasn't just strength she had, it was skill, and it was clear she knew how to read an opponent better than anyone he had ever faced. They grappled, locked in a fierce, sweaty struggle, with Emily landing a few well-timed blows to his sides. Zephyros grunted, both in pain and frustration. No one had ever been able to make him work this hard, let alone land blows that actually hurt. He tried to intimidate her with his sheer power, but she was unfazed, her grin only widening with each exchange. "I thought you were supposed to be the big, scary alien general," Emily teased as she effortlessly maneuvered behind him, giving him a playful shove that sent him stumbling forward. "So far, you're more like a wind-up toy with a broken arm," Zephyros growled, his pride beginning to fray. "You should not mock me, human. I am far more powerful than you think." But Emily wasn't intimidated. She stepped back, cocking her head, her eyes gleaming with a mix of humor and challenge. "Oh, I'm sure you're powerful, big guy. But strength isn't everything. It's about strategy. It's about knowing when to use that strength, when to hold back. You've got power, but I've got tactics." For a brief moment, Zephyros felt the weight of her words. He was used to brute force, to overwhelming enemies with his might. But here, in this sparring ring, he wasn't the overwhelming force. Emily was showing him how it felt to be outmaneuvered. It was frustrating, but oddly thrilling. He hadn't expected to learn something from a human, let alone a woman, but here he was, genuinely struggling. Eventually, the match ended, with Zephyros out of breath, his muscles aching in ways they never had before. He stood there, panting, his face flushed with the exertion of the fight. Emily, on the other hand, seemed barely winded, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Well," she said with a smirk, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead, "you're definitely a little stronger than I thought, but I still kicked your ass." Zephyros's pride wanted to lash out, but he held back. The truth was undeniable. She had outmaneuvered him, shown him a side of combat that he hadn't considered before. He was both angry and intrigued. "You're more than I expected," Emily winked at him. I've got a lot more surprises in store, General. You've got strength, but I've got brains, and I can use them better than you ever thought possible. Their eyes locked for a moment, an unspoken tension between them. Zephyros felt something stir inside him, something unfamiliar. Was it respect? Admiration? Or maybe something else? He couldn't tell, but he knew one thing: he wanted more. The rest of the night passed in a blur, with the two of them continuing their banter, but there was an undeniable shift. The playful teasing and challenges turned into something deeper, more flirtatious. They shared drinks, laughed at their own awkward moments, and engaged in conversation that ranged from combat tactics to the absurdities of life in space. At some point, their flirtation took a more intimate turn. What had started as a rivalry between two strong-willed individuals slowly morphed into a night of passion. Zephyros, despite his earlier arrogance, was no match for Emily's strategic mind, and what followed was a night that neither of them would ever forget. And that was how it began, with a battle of strength, wit, and an unexpected connection. Neither of them could have anticipated just how far that connection would go, but by the end of the night, Zephyros found himself humbled in ways he never thought possible. He couldn't sit down without feeling the aftermath of their encounter, and it wasn't just his body that was sore. The night had descended into chaos. Zephyros, the stoic, indestructible alien general, was now thoroughly intoxicated. The last time he had indulged in alcohol was decades ago, and back then, he'd kept it to a minimum. Tonight was different, though. Emily had insisted they partake in Earth's customs, and after the challenge in the sparring ring, he felt a strange sense of vulnerability. There was something about her, something that both fascinated and frustrated him. And when she handed him the first glass of Earth's liquor, he couldn't say no. "Come on, big guy," Emily teased as she topped off his glass again, a wicked smile playing on her lips. "Let's see if the great general can handle his booze." Zephyros, still feeling the heat of their earlier exchange, grinned. He could handle anything. He had conquered planets, defeated armies, and outlasted the fiercest warriors. A little alcohol wasn't going to break him. He raised the glass and drank deeply, the fiery liquid burning its way down his throat. The taste was unlike anything he'd experienced before, bitter, sharp, and strangely comforting. Emily took a sip of her own drink, watching him closely. "You know, I didn't think you'd actually drink it. Most of you aliens tend to shy away from human traditions," he scoffed, setting the glass down. "I'm not some fragile creature that can't handle a little earth liquor." "Sure you're not," Emily said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Prove it, then." A challenge was issued, and Zephyros, ever the prideful being, accepted. What followed was a night filled with drinking games and ridiculous challenges. The more they drank, the more ridiculous their competition became. Emily dared him to arm wrestle, which he accepted with all the seriousness of a military officer preparing for battle. She wasn't even breaking a sweat as she effortlessly countered his moves. And every time he was bested, she laughed, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Zephyros wasn't used to this. He was used to commanding the battlefield, not being outwitted or outlasted in something as trivial as a drinking contest. But he was too deep into the challenge now, too deep into the strange dynamic they were forming. His competitive nature wouldn't let him back down, even when his head started to spin and his body began to betray him. Every sip seemed to make him weaker, slower, but Emily just kept going, always one step ahead, always making him work harder. Finally, the inevitable happened. Zephyros staggered slightly, his vision blurring. Emily watched him with a sly grin, clearly enjoying the sight of the powerful general being reduced to a bumbling fool. He tried to steady himself, but his body wasn't cooperating. "You're a slippery one, human," he muttered, his voice thick from the alcohol. She leaned in, her face inches from his. "I'm not the one who got drunk now, am I?" Zephyros glared at her, but there was no fire behind his eyes. He was too far gone. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he let out a short, frustrated laugh. "I've fought entire armies, survived brutal wars, and now I'm bested by a drink." Emily's laugh was soft, almost tender. She reached out, placing a hand on his arm to steady him. Well, General, not every battle is won with strength. Sometimes it's the mind that wins the war. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and for the first time, Zephyros felt something stir within him that wasn't just pride. Was it admiration? Respect? Or was it something else? Before he could figure it out, Emily stood up, stretching her arms above her head. All right, tough guy. You've had enough of the human traditions for tonight. Time to get some rest. But don't think this means I'll go easy on you next time. Zephyros barely had the strength to stand, but he managed to push himself upright. I don't go easy on anyone, Emily, he growled, but there was no conviction in his voice. She smirked, then added with a wink, We'll see about that. The rest of the night was a blur. At some point, they ended up in a room. Zephyros couldn't remember how they got there, but there they were, the general and the strategist, both intoxicated in ways that were far beyond just the liquor. He felt the pull of her presence, the way she seemed to challenge him at every turn, and he found himself wanting more. More of her wit. More of her strength. More of whatever it was that made her so damn intriguing. He tried to play it cool, but in his drunken state, his usual composure was slipping fast. Emily, however, wasn't intimidated. She had a way of seeing right through him, of knowing exactly how to push his buttons, how to make him laugh, how to make him feel both powerful and powerless all at once. And tonight, he felt more than anything else, human. The physical tension between them became undeniable. There were no words for it, just the chemistry that pulsed in the space between their bodies. The laughs and jabs faded, replaced by an awkward silence as Emily closed the distance between them. She wasn't playing games anymore. And neither was he. Zephyros' mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. He was a warlord, an apex predator, and yet here he was, facing a human woman who had disarmed him completely. It wasn't just physical. It wasn't even just about the night they'd shared. It was something deeper, something he wasn't ready to admit. Before he could stop himself, he reached for her, pulling her closer. Emily responded immediately, her lips crashing into his with an intensity that left him momentarily stunned. She knew how to take control, how to keep him on edge, and as they stumbled into the bed, it was clear that this was a battle either of them was willing to lose. But it wasn't just physical. No, this night was different. There was something in the air, an unspoken understanding that this wasn't just about conquering, but about connection. And for once, Zephyros felt like he might actually lose, but in a way that made him feel more alive than he ever had before. Zephyros woke up to the dull ache of his entire body. It was the kind of pain he was used to after a brutal battle, but this time it was different. This wasn't from being on the front lines or surviving an intergalactic war. No, this was from something far more humiliating, a night spent in the arms of a human who had outlasted him, outmaneuvered him, and outclassed him in every way imaginable. He groaned, trying to sit up, but the moment he shifted, pain shot through his muscles. His body felt like it had been put through the ringer, and the worst part was that the soreness wasn't just physical. He was emotionally battered too. What had happened the previous night was something he couldn't quite explain, something that didn't fit within the rigid framework of power and control he had lived by for centuries. He glanced over at Emily, still asleep beside him. She looked so peaceful, so unaware of the storm she had caused within him. Zephyros, the mighty alien general, the conqueror of worlds, had been bested by a human woman. Not just in strength, but in everything. And what was worse, he was beginning to enjoy it. Her calm, measured demeanor had challenged his every assumption about humans. Her quiet confidence had made him question his own arrogance. He couldn't even sit up properly without thinking of her. He sighed deeply, carefully trying to rise, but the moment he shifted his weight, the pain in his lower back made him wince. What the hell happened last night? He muttered to himself. He had been so sure of his own invincibility, yet here he was, nursing a sore body after a night spent with a human. A human who had not only matched him in physical strength but had, in her own way, dominated him. Zephyros rubbed his face, trying to shake off the lingering effects of the alcohol. His mind raced, trying to piece together the events that had led to this humiliating state. The drinking games, the ridiculous challenges, the physical contest that had quickly spiraled into something far more intimate. It had all started out as a joke, a way to prove to Emily that he was still the mighty general he had always been. But somewhere along the way, the line between competition and connection had blurred, and now he couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, he had miscalculated. "Great," he muttered, sitting up more carefully this time. "What am I supposed to do now?" His head was pounding, his body ached in places he didn't even know existed, but there was something else. Something nagging at the back of his mind. He couldn't stop thinking about her. About Emily. She had seen through him in ways no one ever had. And that terrified him. Just then, Emily stirred beside him, her eyes blinking open. She looked up at him with a lazy smile, clearly enjoying the sight of him struggling. "Morning, General," she said, her voice laced with amusement. "How's the mighty alien warrior holding up?" Zephyros gritted his teeth, trying to maintain his composure. "I'll survive," he said, though it came out more as a groan than anything resembling confidence. Emily laughed softly, sitting up and stretching. "I think you might be underestimating your condition. You look like you've been through a war. And, lost." He shot her a pointed look, but there was no malice in his gaze. She had won. She had won in every way imaginable. And somehow, that fact both frustrated and intrigued him. "I'm not used to losing," he admitted, his voice low. "And I'm certainly not used to being bested by a human." Emily raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. "Well, you'll get used to it. I'm full of surprises." Zephyros chuckled, though it was more out of resignation than humor. "I didn't think humans were capable of surprising me. But you've done that in spades." Her grin widened, and she leaned back against the pillows. "You think you've figured us out, don't you? But there's so much more to us than meets the eye. Just because we're smaller and weaker than you doesn't mean we're any less dangerous. You found that out last night." Zephyros nodded, though he was still processing everything. His initial thoughts about Earth's people had been arrogant. He had thought them fragile, easily subdued. But Emily had shattered that illusion with her intellect, her strength, and her determination. He had expected a quick and easy victory, but instead, he had found himself humbled by the most unexpected of opponents. "I can't remember the last time I've been this humbled," he confessed, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Emily's expression softened for a moment, her teasing tone fading. "Well, get used to it, General. Because you've just met the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to us humans than you think. And next time, you won't be so quick to underestimate us." Zephyros felt a strange warmth in his chest at her words. It wasn't just her strength or her intellect that had won him over. It was the way she didn't back down, the way she held her own even when facing someone as powerful as him. She wasn't intimidated. And that, more than anything, had made him see her in a new light. "Next time," he said, the challenge in his voice softening, "I won't be so quick to underestimate you. But be warned, human. I don't lose twice." Emily laughed, the sound light and full of promise. "We'll see about that, General. We'll see." There was a moment of silence, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Zephyros didn't feel like the predator. He didn't feel like the one in control. Instead, he felt something else entirely, something unfamiliar and undeniably human. He didn't know what this was, or where it would lead, but for the first time, he wasn't ready to fight it. He wasn't sure if he'd ever win another battle with Emily, but in that moment, he didn't care. He couldn't sit down because his body was sore, but there was something else, something deeper that he couldn't quite explain. "Let's get this over with," he muttered, standing up with as much dignity as he could muster. "I have a war to win." But Emily's voice stopped him before he could leave. "War? What war, General? You've already lost." Her words hung in the air as he stood frozen, realizing for the first time that the true battle wasn't on some distant battlefield. No, it was right here, in the space between them, where pride, power, and passion collided in a way he never could have anticipated. And somehow, he couldn't wait for the next round. Zephyros stood in front of his war council, his chest tight and his mind far from the tactical discussions unfolding before him. The usual discussions about intergalactic strategy and the fate of countless star systems seemed distant now. His mind kept drifting back to Earth, back to Emily, and the night that had utterly upended everything he thought he knew about himself. It wasn't just the physical exhaustion that weighed on him, it was the growing realization that something had shifted. Something deep within him that he couldn't name. The council members spoke in serious tones about their next moves, discussing the ongoing war and potential strategies for crushing Earth's resistance. But Zephyros couldn't focus. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily's grin, her challenge, and how she had outlasted him at every turn. It was maddening. She had bested him in ways that no one had ever managed, and it wasn't just the strength in their physical confrontation. It was her intellect, her wit, and most of all, the way she had made him feel like an equal. It was an entirely new experience for him. "General?" One of his commanders interrupted his thoughts, her voice cutting through the fog. "Did you hear what I said?" Zephyros blinked, snapping back to the present. "Sorry. What was that?" he asked, forcing himself to pay attention. "We're moving forward with the final strike on Earth's defense base," the commander replied. "We need your decision on the tactical approach." Zephyros glanced at the holographic display, showing the schematic of Earth's defense system. His mind immediately went to work, analyzing the most effective way to breach the defenses. It was what he had always done, calculating, ruthless, unstoppable. But now, for the first time, doubt crept in. His mind kept drifting back to Emily and the lessons he'd learned from her. Was this war really about conquest, or was it about proving something to himself? He had always believed that winning was the only thing that mattered, but now he questioned what victory even meant. Could he keep destroying worlds, crushing civilizations, without truly understanding what he was fighting for? The thought unsettled him more than he cared to admit. "We'll proceed with the attack," Zephyros said, his voice steady, though internally he felt the conflict raging. "But I want Earth's strategy examined more thoroughly. We're not just going to crush them. We need to understand their will to fight. Something's different about them." The council exchanged looks, but no one questioned his orders. They were used to Zephyros's brutal decisiveness, but this time, something was off. He knew it, and now they knew it too. His mind wasn't fully in the war. It was caught between two worlds, between the fight for dominance and the growing respect he felt for the very species he had planned to annihilate. As the meeting ended, Zephyros left the room without another word. His commanders had no idea what was really going on inside his head, but that was just the way he liked it. He couldn't let them see the cracks forming in his confidence. He had to remain the general, the unshakable force that commanded loyalty and fear. But deep down, he knew things were changing. He wasn't the same man who had arrived on Earth, confident in his superiority. No, he had met someone who had made him question everything. The very human he had so casually dismissed as weak had shown him what true strength was. That evening, when Zephyros returned to his quarters, he found himself staring out into the vastness of space, his thoughts a whirlwind. The stars twinkled in the distance, but all he could think about was Earth and the woman who had turned his world upside down. Emily. Her quiet determination, her ability to remain calm in the face of overwhelming odds, had left an indelible mark on him. He reached for his communicator, his fingers hovering over the buttons. The logical part of him knew that he should stay focused on the mission, on the conquest of Earth. But the part of him that had been forever changed by their encounter, the part that had felt what it was like to be humbled, to be truly seen, couldn't shake the need to reach out to her. He hesitated. The communicator sat in his hand, waiting for him to make a decision. Was it too soon? Was it too dangerous to acknowledge the shift in his feelings? He had never been one to second-guess himself, but something about Emily made him feel vulnerable, something he hadn't felt in centuries. After a long pause, Zephyros finally put the communicator down. No message. Not yet. He needed time to figure this out. There was too much at stake, too many lives, too many battles yet to be fought. He couldn't afford to be distracted by emotions. But even as he tried to focus on the task at hand, he knew one thing for sure: Emily had changed him. She had taken the seemingly invincible alien general and made him question what it really meant to be strong. It wasn't just about physical dominance or military prowess. Strength could be found in vulnerability, in the willingness to learn from others. And Emily had shown him that in the most unexpected way. As he lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, Zephyros couldn't help but smile. It was a small, almost imperceptible shift, but it was there. His respect for humanity had grown, and in turn, so had his respect for himself. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel the need to prove his strength to anyone, not even to himself. He wasn't sure where this would lead, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid of the unknown. His next steps were no longer just about conquering planets, or expanding his empire. They were about understanding what it meant to be more than just a warrior. And just maybe it was about finding a way to reconcile the warrior within him with the unexpected connection he had formed with Emily. That was the real challenge. That was the true war.